Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, I'm kind of putting on my clinical psychologist hat to dissect what is basically a grim, dark, gothic fable woven through art, folklore, and modern cinema. We are going to conduct a psychological autopsy on the very architecture of human isolation. Specifically, we're exploring the sad clown paradox and this fascinating concept of performative deception. By looking at the art and the stories humanity creates, we can actually uncover our own repressed traumas and societal anxieties. It's a wildly fascinating look into the human psyche.
Just listen to this chilling clinical reality for a second. Ghosts of their own making. Guests who look exactly like ourselves. Wow, right? It immediately hooks us into this terrifying fact that true horror isn't found in external, fantastical monsters roaring out in the dark woods. No way. The most terrifying threats are incredibly familiar. They are the reflections of our own hidden internal states. As you'll see, the absolute most effective way to dismantle humanity isn't with claws and fangs, but with a mirror. Now, to really understand what's going on here, we need a solid clinical framework. We're going to use the classic Freudian triad, the id, the ego, and the superego, and intertwine it with the sad clown paradox. If you aren't familiar, this paradox is basically a tragedy where the person who works tirelessly to create happiness for everyone else is entirely unable to cheer themselves up. Over the course of this explainer, we'll see exactly how the superego's societal demands, the id's repressed desires, and a collapsing ego create a desperately painful disconnect between public performance and private despair.
Section 1. The Cosmic Theater, Society's Hidden Internal States.
So let's take a step back and observe humanity's collective madness from, a clinical cosmic distance. Our source texts tell this profound fable about the village of the Ever-Watchful. These villagers spent literally generations terrified of external monsters they called the Nightwalkers. They fortified their gates, built walls, lived in constant fear, the whole shebang. But eventually, they suffered what the text calls a great unmasking. They realized these creatures out in the woods were merely illusions. They were reflections of their own dismantled humanity, ghosts of their own making.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the psychology of projection. Notice how the villagers took their own internal anxieties, their deep insecurities, their collective hatred and lurid impossible rituals, and just mapped them onto fabricated physical enemies. By codifying these terrified whispers into strict doctrine, a society projects its own internal darkness onto an imagined other. And why do we do this? Because it is so much easier to fight a monster at the gate than it is to actually face the mirror.
Section 2. Superego, the jester's sacrifice.
So what happens when a society finally realizes the monsters are actually just themselves? Well, they fall into this gray, silent despair. To heal this broken spirit, the elders appointed jester. And there was a stark psychological contrast at play here. As the superego, the jester is tasked with the public duty of restoring joy, providing vibrant humor, and acting as the beacon of societal healing. But his private reality is something entirely different, one of solitary melancholy, hidden vulnerability, and profound emotional self-sacrifice. The disconnect between these two states is devastating.
Notice how the jester's vibrant crimson suit is defined here. It's not this costume of authentic joy. Clinically speaking, it's actually functioning as a heavy shroud. The text describes a grand celebration where the village is healing, the music is playing, and what does the jester do? He withdraws into the shadows. He literally sits as a living mask in solitary melancholy. The villagers only ever see the humor. They never see the internal despondency that buys their laughter.
Section 3. The Sad Clown Paradox, a Desolate Self-Portrait.
Now, this paradox isn't just some fairy tale. We literally see it embodied throughout history and culture, representing the total collapse of the isolated ego. Let's analyze Jan Matejko's famous painting, Stanchik. The painting shows a royal jester sitting in the dark, mourning the loss of the city of Smolensk, all while a massive party goes on in the background. But as a psychologist dissecting the artistic intent, the absolutely crucial point is that Matejko modeled the jester's face after his own. This transforms the painting into an incredibly intimate, psychological study of the artist himself. It's a desolate self-portrait showing the painful disconnection between his public duty to provide social commentary and his private, crushing loneliness.
And we see this exact same clinical pattern mirrored in modern cinema too, especially in the film Joker. It just perfectly captures emotional self-sacrifice. The narrative focuses on an individual who is professionally required to work super hard to make people laugh, yet is entirely unable to make himself laugh. It totally unmasks the entertainer, showing that when you are required to be the life of an event you cannot emotionally join, the end result is profound, agonizing isolation.
Section 4. Id, the Crimson Guest.
Now, what's really interesting here is that performative deception doesn't always hide sadness. Sometimes it hides something vastly more dangerous, shifting us from the superego's duty directly to the id's repressed desires. Let's look at another piece of art from the sources, Edward von Grützner's 1895 painting, Mephisto. Usually, demons are depicted as terrifying beasts with horns, right? But notice how the demonic id is portrayed here. He doesn't roar. He appears as an elegantly dressed elderly man in a red suit. The source text describes him as uncomfortably human. And that's the point. The most dangerous evil isn't a fantastical creature. It's someone you could easily pass on the street. Let's dissect the visual elements of this painting like a clinical autopsy. Step 1. Notice the theatrical attire, specifically that exaggerated feather in his hat. It signals he's playing a part, adopting a pleasant human form to avoid being threatening. Step 2. The expression of temptation. Look closely at the subtle curve of his lips. He is actively enjoying the very moment he plants doubt in the viewer's mind. And step 3. The uneasy composition. He's leaning forward, waiting for an answer to a proposal, his gaze directed just outside the frame. It creates this incredible psychological tension.
This whole visual analysis ties directly into the parable of the crimson guest from our texts. The id operates not through fear, but through seduction. Notice how this figure uses reason over force. He simply places a contract on the table and waits. He acts as a visual bridge to our own dark desires because he understands exactly what we secretly want. The id doesn't force you to dismantle your humanity. It just offers you a very reasonable, convenient choice to do it yourself.
Section 5. Mirrors of performative deception.
So we've looked at the jester and we've looked at the demon. Bringing these two figures together explicitly maps out how performative deception operates in psychologically opposite directions. Consider the jester for a second. The mask he wears is one of vibrant humor and societal duty, while the inner darkness he hides is his own agonizing vulnerability and despair. He uses the mask to protect the public from his darkness. Now consider Mephisto, the id. The mask he wears is elegant, reasonable, and charming, but the inner darkness he hides is pure demonic intent. He uses the mask to protect his darkness from the public. So, the absolutely crucial point connecting all these sources is this shared visual motif, the crimson suit. Whether it's the jester literally bleeding out his own emotional energy for the village, or the dark one offering seductive contracts, the crimson suit acts as a psychological mirror. Both figures reflect society back at itself. They show us our hidden internal states, our anxieties, and our secret, unspoken desires.
Section 6. The final diagnosis.
This brings us to the conclusion of our theatrical psychoanalysis, where we resolve this entire story in the total isolation of the ego. Consider the absolute gravity of this statement. The most profound isolation is not being alone in the woods, but being the life of a party you can never truly join. This right here is the core tragedy of the sad clown paradox. It's the crushing hidden weight of performative deception. When society demands that you wear a mask, whether it's to hide your own pain so others can smile, or to hide your darker nature so you fit in, the end result is the total dismantling of your authentic self.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate takeaway from these artistic studies. We've seen that the Nightwalkers weren't real, but the isolation of the jester and the seduction of the crimson guest absolutely were. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought on our final slide. Who is the true monster in the mirror? Are you hiding your own despair behind a mask just to keep the peace? Or are you dismantling your own humanity for the sake of convenience? Take a really long look in that mirror and ask yourself what kind of guest you've invited in.